The Luminous Mind, episode 007.
And really, people need to become that without the system of the school. They need to become their own authority and their own manager. And like with those kind of self-directed skills, like the world is your oyster basically today.
Benjamin Franklin once said, "Do not curse the darkness, rather light a candle instead." If you're ready to set your mind on fire, then prepare yourself for the Luminous Mind with your host, Rebecca Bowman.
Today's fire starter is Kyle Pearce. He's passionate about using technology to accelerate success. He runs a self-directed learning community called DYI Genius that helps people of all ages learn outside traditional schools and use new technological tools to live and work with more autonomy, mastery, and purpose. He also does high-performance training workshops for creative teams in Vancouver, Canada, through his company Unified Stream. He trains people how to use flow psychology, the habits of mindful and quantified self-tools to measure, improve, and optimize their health, productivity, and performance. Welcome, Kyle. Just briefly tell me about yourself, family, hobbies, and then your professional positions.
All right. I live in Vancouver, and I live downtown in the city. If you've ever been to Vancouver, it's on the ocean, there's mountains. It's a great place to live an outdoor recreation kind of lifestyle, and that's what I love about it. I spend my weekends mountain biking in the mountains and skiing and trekking and camping and exploring. So I love to do that. I love to be outside. I love novelty and just being in nature. In terms of hobbies, I just love to learn. I've always been a passionate learner. Self-education has always been a big part of my life, just being curious and trying to learn new things and trying to challenge myself in new ways and learn new skills. And out of that basically grew my company, DIY Genius, which I basically teach people how to learn online, become self-directed learners, and basically be their own boss. They don't need to get a job. They can create their own job, work for themselves. I really think that digital technology really empowers that today.
Yeah, and like you said, be able to live the lifestyle that you want to live.
Yeah, like technology provides so many new opportunities to think differently, new possibilities. Like you don't need to work in a city anymore. You can work in Thailand or Costa Rica, anywhere in the world, and it's very empowering because if you know how to use the technology well and know how to manage your time and be productive, where you work doesn't matter anymore.
That's great. Can you tell me your own personal educational experience, what it was like as a kid for you in education and how your educational philosophy grew?
Yeah, sure. Well, basically, I kind of have a unique perspective being ADHD. So when I was young, they diagnosed me with ADHD. They tried to put me on drugs for that, and I just didn't like the idea. My family didn't like the idea of me being drugged up. So I rejected that pretty fast. And just being in school with someone with ADHD, the system is not designed for people that are that energetic and creative. And I just found school to be a prison and found the teachers very uninspiring. The broadcast kind of lecture-oriented style, just a very boring way to learn. I'm more hands-on. I want to create. I want to design. I want to experiment. And I just felt school was just a very boring, unimaginative way to learn. And I saw how it just turned people off learning and turned people off like their natural creativity and curiosity. And for me, it was a struggle going through the system to maintain that. And I did. I went through the whole system and I graduated. And then I got into a university and I took business, international politics in university. And basically, I got through university, did okay, but I didn't really learn much practical stuff in university. To be honest, what I learned in university, even in business, has not been very practical in the real world. I find not much of what's taught in academia is very practical in the real world, and I think the universities are very, very slow to adapt to the changes today. And basically, when I was in school, I created my own business selling surf clothing. It's called Grandpa Sunshine Clothing, GS Clothing for short. It was basically tiki-based surf clothing, and I sold online. I built an e-commerce website. And out of that, I learned all these digital skills, like how to build a website, how to sell online, how to, process payments, how to, build an email list, how to build an audience, how to promote, how to make connections online. And out of that, I basically created my own job. It's led to all sorts of amazing opportunities in my life.
That sounds fantastic. And so talking about that with your educational background, and then also how did your online business of DIY Genius, tell us a little bit about that business and how it helps people learn online.
It's basically pretty much the largest website for self-education out there. And I basically show people how to create a learning plan and create a life path that's based around their own sense of autonomy and mastery and purpose, basically intrinsic motivation, which is what's not really focused on in school. In school, it's more focused on rewards and punishment. And in the workplace, that's often the way it is as well. I like to think of the workplace as basically school for adults, and I basically teach people how they don't need to have that system. If they're self-motivated and they follow certain principles, productivity principles and learning principles, they can create their own business and create their own product or service-based business and not have to work for someone else, which I think today is not a very good long-term plan because companies don't really care so much about employees anymore. Employees are usually interchangeable parts in this machine. And to get ahead these days, you kind of got to do your own thing and build your own reputation, your own skills. So I just help people do that through DIY Genius.
Great. And so what age group do you target? Do you go high school through all the way up to adult? I noticed on your website it talks about lifelong learning, but do you help high school students at all?
I work with lots of high school students. For the most part, it's adults, but I got people I've worked with, they're 12 years old that have started businesses and, learned how to code, build apps. In many ways, with these digital skills related to the internet, young people have a huge advantage. People are very slow to learn this stuff. Their minds are not wired for the digital age. Whereas young people, they can pick this up so fast. And, a 10-year-old today could start a business, while they're in school. There's so many opportunities.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I know I've worked in public policy before, and when you're talking about education and in legislative measures, a lot of the parents are much slower to come on when you have children that are practically begging. Take a miniature computer around it with them in their pocket, and they're doing amazing things as far as with YouTube and some of their online presence. And how can you help them do that? Growing their own business or presenting an online presence maybe they could use for college application?
Well, usually I start out with personal branding, which is basically how someone appears online. So personal branding is basically when someone Googles you, what comes up? And for some people, nothing comes up, and that's a huge problem because every good employer is going to hire you for a well-paying job. Is going to Google you. And really that's this in many cases, especially in digital media jobs or online business-related jobs, that's the deciding factor. It's not so much what you say about yourself on a resume as what you can show that you can actually do. And now with the internet, it's so easy to show off your skills if you're a writer or you're an artist or you make videos or, you're a business strategist or you're, some sort of marketing person. You should be able to show that online, and people want to hire people that, are initiators and they're proactive. And building that online, when someone sees that, when they Google your name, they see you're not just watching TV and being consumed by all this media culture that's so trivial and just wasteful of people's energy, but you're actually doing something, creating things yourself. This is the skill set that companies want. They want creativity. They want self-directed people, at least in the good companies that are your Googles and your Microsofts, the companies that are growing and actually are, increasing their jobs, that they kind of want these self-starters, these people that work well on teams and get along with people and be creative. So really basically having a website, something as simple as a platform like about.me, it's like a personal branding platform that is free, integrates all your social media accounts like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube. So if a young person is making YouTube videos, they should totally link that from a central profile so that employers can easily see that and see the creativity they're putting into those videos and seeing how they're building an audience. They can see the subscribers and the comments and the kind of interaction. And that's a really valuable skill today, in all sorts of jobs. And then obviously LinkedIn's a huge one. When I hire someone, I hire them for their network and for their audience. And basically on LinkedIn, you can look at someone's profile and their connections and see how you're connected to them and how people on your team or your company are connected to them. And you can see whether they have influence, whether their connections are just other students or their connections are business leaders and people they've met networking and people they've kind of made an effort to meet. And really you want to meet these active engagers. You want to hire these people that are using these tools to engage people and build an audience and and build a network of change makers and influencers. And it's now very easy and transparent to see that and to really see the average people versus the extraordinary people. And companies want the extraordinary people, and they'll pay them as much as necessary, whereas companies don't want the average people anymore. The kind of average jobs don't really exist anymore. They're being automated and outsourced.
I definitely agree with what you're saying, but how can they go about educating themselves? Do you feel like there's a better way that students could come out better prepared for the workforce and maybe with some skills that will actually matter in the future?
Yeah, I think university is like a dying model. I think it's not nearly as effective as it used to be. And if you can go inexpensively to university, I still recommend it to people just because it's fun. It's a country club for intelligent people. But if you're spending $30,000, $40,000 a year to go to university, like unless you want to be a doctor or a profession or an academic, you're kind of crazy to do that. Like it's going into that much debt for a degree that really doesn't mean much at all in the workforce.
Well, and we have so many students now. We want to show that they're producers and not just consumers. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we've seen in the university model anymore is that these kids expect to go to college and when they come out have some nice job waiting for them and paycheck, and then they realize that they're back flipping burgers. I mean, what would your recommendation be to young people and how to best educate themselves and then do the networking that we talked about with the LinkedIn? You know, when you are young too, how does a person network with people of influence?
Well, like something as simple as meetup.com, find local meetups in your area, find business networking meetups. If you're, I'd say, 14, maybe is a pretty young age, you could start doing this stuff. Maybe younger than that would be a little harder. But like if you're a teenager going out to this stuff, it's not common, but I meet teenagers at these kind of networking meetups. And like if I meet a teenager there, I'm love to help them. I'd love to talk to them. I'm impressed that they're there. So like people that do things that aren't common, they really stand out. And they can kind of rise very fast and learn very fast and make connections very fast at really any age. But I think in terms of what you're saying about university, I think the key thing today is that people know themselves and they know what their talents are and what their gifts are and what they like doing and what they're passionate about, and not just go to university because your parents say or society says it, because what worked 30 years ago doesn't work very well today necessarily. And if someone goes to university with a specific action plan and they need to go to university, I think, to get where they need to go, that's fine. But if they're just going to university because they were told they should go and it's like any better ideas,
they won't end up with a decent job if they don't go. No. That's really not very good advice anymore, right?
No. And I think if you're going to spend that kind of money, there's so many better ways to do it now. Like, I think we live in this university called Planet Earth. And like you can go travel the world and study history and philosophy and politics and meet people and volunteer and work your way around the world, and you'll learn so much more than you'd ever learn in a classroom. Like if you want to get a liberal arts education, like the books are all freely available in the public domain. You can download them online onto your iPad or your Kindle, or get them at a bookstore. So much of this stuff is online now, and really what's important is that people are self-directed and they're motivated, and not just that, they have a productivity system. Because ultimately, school is a productivity system. It's of rewards and punishment that make you hit deadlines, and you have an authority figure to tell you what to do. And really, people need to become that without the system of the school. They need to become their own authority and their own manager. And like with those kind of self-directed skills, like the world is your oyster basically today.
That is so true. And like you said, the person that does uncommon things that aren't common, are the ones that are definitely going to stand out.
Before we go on, let's take a minute and thank our sponsors.
If you would like to see your business grow, then contact us at the Luminous Mind for advertising space on the luminousmind.net or on the podcast, the Luminous Mind Podcast.
Welcome back.
Do you want to give us kind of an overview of what kind of courses that a person could find on your website, and then how you work with those courses, just any general information you have about them?
Yeah, so I have courses on, for example, ranging the whole gauntlet from, like, say, meditation. So meditation is one of the best ways to train self-direction and train kind of discipline and train focus. And this day and age, our attention is so divided by our smartphones and Facebook and all these notifications that I recommend so much to people. If you want to work for yourself, if you want to learn on your own, you need to meditate every day, just because that's how you train your mind to be focused and present. Meditation for me has really helped me deal with ADHD. Like, it's been able to overcome basically ADHD and channel my creative energy instead of in a distraction into like my own projects. And so meditation, I'm a huge believer in that, and that's a big part of what I do, is teaching people how to basically train their own minds, their own ability to learn and focus, which is huge. And then I also have stuff on productivity. I teach something called flow productivity. So that's basically engineering flow states in what you do. And basically a flow state is a term in psychology when someone is in an optimal state of experience where they both feel their best and they perform their best. And by basically setting up your workday and not multitasking as kind of the foundation, you can get into these states where you become really creative and really focused, and you can get things done much more rapidly. And I basically help people discover in their day, when they're most effective and how they can orient their time and how they can set up their working and productivity system so they're not being interrupted by other people and by email and by their phones, and they're really getting into the zone when they're learning and when they're working. Because if you see a lot of people today, I work a lot of times, I'll go around, I'm traveling, and I'll be in coffee shops working. And I see people, the way they study today, they got their computer open on Facebook, they got their phone beside them, they got their notes in front of them or their book they're reading, and they're just like switching constantly every like minute or two often between these three different ways of like using your attention. And this is a disaster for learning. It's dividing your attention while you're learning reduces your memory and your recall. It's an awful thing to do, but everyone does it. And it's kind of how we've been trained now by digital technology, because these technologies can multitask very well, but the human brain can't. Like study after study proves that we actually can't multitask. We're just task switching rapidly. And every time we do that, we're releasing adrenaline and cortisol, the stress hormone. So people are more and more anxious and tired than ever before and less able to focus on one thing. And really, if I can say one thing that really matters today, it's being able to focus on something to complete it, like without getting distracted or sidetracked. And for a lot of people, that's very, very hard to do. Through productivity training and meditation, you can really train yourself to be able to do this kind of stuff.
Well, and I think what you're saying, too, a project to completion, I think that would help young people if they can show that. Because like you said, you see so many people that are just distracted. And when you see a young person that actually can see a project to completion, that really sets them out, too. I was just looking through some of your courses. I want to ask you about just some of them and how kids can use them. I was just laughing when you were talking about that because I have a teenage son. He does online learning, and this morning I come up and he's got YouTube open and he's got all of his social media sites open. He told me he was up doing his schoolwork, and he's like, well, just switch back and forth. So I definitely need to get him on your curriculum. But one of the things that I noticed was interesting is the best iPhone, iPad apps for learners on the go was one of your courses. Do you want to expand upon that one?
Yeah, so I have a course released last month called the iPhone Office, which is basically using iOS to double your productivity. So basically what that course is about is taking a device like our smartphone, which for a lot of people ruins their productivity and distracts them, and showing them how to use it to track their time, to schedule their time, to have reminders, to use it to collaborate with people online, virtual meetings, to use it to delegate and outsource things they're not good at. One of the things I teach is something called the 80-20 rule. And basically, the 80-20 rule is kind of proven in a whole bunch of different disciplines that about 20% of your efforts will produce 80% of your results. So people, what they should do is focus on where their time is most valuable, where they can provide the best result and the best value to other people or to the company they work for. And, the rest of the things that are less valuable and bog them down, they should outsource or delegate that stuff. So, for example, for me, like I could do my own taxes, I could do all my administration and accounting, but that's not my expertise. I'm not very good at it. And like I value my time, and if my time's worth $80 an hour and I can outsource that to someone else who's a professional in that area for $20 an hour, like I need to do that to be productive. So a lot of what I do is just like using tools to automate things and make things easy so that I'm not wasting my time doing things A, I'm not good at, and B, I don't like to do.
And sometimes when you're not good at it. It takes you twice as long as if you outsourced it. Another one of your courses is how to master the art of speed reading without losing comprehension. Kind of talk about that one. I can see so many places that would be a valuable asset.
Yeah, well, speed reading is a very useful skill, and there's a lot of tools you can use to speed read on your iPhone or speed read on your iPad or speed read on the web. And really, like, one of the big things around speed reading trading is the way most people read is really inefficient. The way it's taught in school, depending on the school, can be good or bad. But basically, a lot of people say the words in their head, and it's called subvocalization. And you can basically train yourself to read without that subvocalization. You'll actually remember better, and read faster. There's great tools out there, like Spritz is a good technology. You can get the Spritz plugin for Chrome, for example. And if you have a certain article you want to have read faster, you can just feed it into the reader and you can speed read it. And then there's Spritz readers as well for iPhone and iPad. There's even a great tool I recommend for iPhone and iPad called AccelerRead, and it basically trains you how to speed read. It basically trains you in a different kind of ways of being able to see more of the page at once and being able to not subvocalize and just simple things like that. You might not want to speed read everything you do, but like when you're doing something for school that you're going to be tested on, if you speed read something and then afterwards you write out some exercises based on what you did, you can actually, remember just as well, if not better.
Well, and if you can read all the material, that will help you in school too.
Yeah,
that's great.
School is a lot of time, right? And if you can do it faster for some things you don't like, you can get through it at least, so you can focus your time on things you like.
Yeah. Another course that I saw that I find interesting is taking free online courses from the world's elite universities. Can you expound upon that one?
Yeah, so those courses you're looking at are actually part of a single course, which I call the Hyperlearning Toolkit. And basically it shows people how to do self-education in the digital age. And that's actually a resource. I basically outline the 10 major online course platforms where you can take free courses basically from, the world's leading educators. So, for example, you have Coursera, which came out of Stanford University, and they have 100 or 200 universities on there providing free courses. And you can learn everything from, how to, learn MBA style business plan writing to, liberal arts stuff to history to neuroscience. And there's amazing resources out there like Harvard, MIT have another platform called edX. And you can basically take university level courses taught by like the guys who probably wrote the textbook at, these Ivy League schools. And in most cases, they're entirely free. And this is really disrupting universities because you can basically get an entire university degree program online for free from often Harvard or MIT or Stanford, which are like way better in terms of quality than your average, university.
Why not learn from the best professors, right?
Yeah, and like a lot of people don't realize that like Coursera, like these courses, the big ones especially, they have hundreds of thousands of students, and you can form student groups, like learning groups online through Google Hangouts where you meet every week, or you can even form groups in your community. Like I've taken courses and there was like hundreds of people in Vancouver that were taking the course. So I just formed a community of 10 people. We met every week, and that worked great. And you learn these really valuable collaboration skills. And a big thing with learning is you have questions and you have difficulties. And on Coursera, for a lot of their courses, the average response time is about 20 minutes to a question because it's all peer-to-peer. So students are answering other students' questions. And the reality is any time of day, whether it's the middle of the night in America, there's people in India, it's the middle of the day there, and they're online learning. So it's like really like worldwide and allows you to, meet people all over the world. And really you can even, travel and learn while you're traveling too.
Which is a whole nother education in itself. So now with the free online courses at the world's most elite universities, do you see a way that the young person can get that education but then able to document it so that they come out from those classes with an opportunity to use in their professional life versus just taking the free courses?
Yeah, so they have certification and they have like more advanced certification that you can pay for. Like for example on Coursera, it's about, I think, $45 a credit. So it's extremely cheap. And then as well, there's online learning portfolios you can build. I think the big thing is while you're taking the course is to have a blog that documents your learning experience and what you're learning. And you can point to that, right? Because basically you just need to prove that you finished the course. Because in most cases, like, a degree just shows you finished the courses. Like in most cases, they don't look at your transcript or your GPA. Like maybe initially when you're first out of school, but beyond that, They're more concerned with other factors like your network and your experience. But basically, like, I think today, like, if you want to become a professional, like a lawyer, a doctor, a dentist, like no one wants a self-trained person in those areas, obviously. And if you want to become an academic, you can go to school. Obviously, you have to. There's gatekeepers for that. But for a lot of other careers, like if you want to learn to code, which is like probably the number one skill today, you can learn it online, and it really doesn't matter where you went to school or what your certification is. The proof is in the pudding, is in your actual code and what you've executed and what you've built, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same with a lot of these emerging skill sets online, like build a website. It doesn't matter where you went to school for it. It matters what the websites you built look like and the references from the people you built them from. That's more important. And like even for writing, like I don't care if someone took a creative writing course. Like I want to see that they published a book on Kindle. Like you can publish a book on Kindle in a day or two. If you have it written, you can just upload it and put it in the marketplace. People that do that kind of stuff really set themselves apart. And like the digital medium just makes it so easy. Like the barrier to entry for all this stuff is so low. Like I have one post where I show people how to create an e-commerce business in 48 hours, and it's literally that easy to do. It takes less than 2 days to be online selling a product. It's like really things have changed, and it used to be like you had to get money and capital to start a business, but now you can bootstrap. You know, if all you have is an idea, you can test out your idea, you can validate it with the market on stuff like Kickstarter and Indiegogo, where you can actually see if people actually want to buy things, and they can pre-order it before you take the risk and build some sort of product.
Well, that's great. Well, and I've noticed your courses are fairly inexpensive too, so it's possible to take all of these courses that help lead to building your professional portfolio for a pretty inexpensive price. Is that right?
Yeah, it's all DIY, so it's like projects, so you're building something. You know, it's so important that if you're going to learn online, that you're really building something tangible, because like the days of just kind of listening to videos or lectures and taking notes and then writing a multiple choice exam at the end, like those days are over. Like especially if you're online, you want to be able to show what you've learned and express it and get creative with it. That's the kind of what separates the kind of average performers from the top performers.
Great. Great.
Well, I think homeschooling is a really interesting area. Like I work with a lot of people that are being homeschooled, and they tend to be in Canada or the United States, where homeschooling's been very accepted. I know some countries have even made it illegal. I think Germany may have done that.
Yeah, that's why we have some in America as the refugees here, because they want to homeschool without the government interfering, and they can't there. So how do you feel your business interacts with homeschoolers?
Mostly online. So what I do in terms of workshops in Vancouver, I mostly do workshops for companies. I go into companies and I help them basically create cloud-based systems to allow their employees to work from anywhere and be able to still track they're getting things done and still collaborate across teams when people aren't physically in the same office. And I teach, mindfulness training and productivity training. But, a lot of the stuff as well can be delivered online. So that's more how I've interacted with homeschoolers. I think unschooling and homeschooling is an ideal way to learn. I think our society really rewards people that are creative and are self-directed. You don't learn that in school.
Yeah.
And homeschooling is great, especially if you're digital savvy, because you don't need to go to school to learn these things if you know how to use the internet, and you can just use all these online tools to really manage yourself and express yourself. And I think that's far more important than finite and algebra and calculus, which for 95% of people is irrelevant to their lives and their work.
Well, and with homeschooling and unschooling, the self-directed learning just goes hand in hand, because students are able to focus on things that they're actually interested in versus, like you said, taking courses just because the government says, okay, this is something that we feel, every person needs a basic understanding in. How do you see education changing to that, where it's more customized for people?
Well, I think it's becoming more and more important that people know themselves and what they really want to do and have a vision for their future and really set goals. Like one of the things I teach in my flow productivity training is, how to create a 5-year plan and then drill down to a 1-year plan and then a 1-month plan and then down to your weekly plan and then your daily plan that you're reviewing every day. So you have very clear goals every day of what you're going to do, and then you have immediate feedback at the end of the day where you can say, oh, I didn't get this done. This is why I couldn't get this done. And then you look at the end of your week and you review your week and you really get an understanding of how what you're doing every day. And this is really important if you're self-employed or you're not in a traditional school, that you're really kind of advancing toward your long-term goals. and you have a very clear action plan to achieve them. Because, without this, you can kind of just meander and, just be set adrift. But when you're very focused on your clear goals, you can become very disciplined, very, very, strong in what you're doing.
And maybe more specialized as well, right?
Yeah.
Where you're
specialization. I think having a skill that you're really good at is super important. But it's never been more important to understand how to collaborate with people and get along with people and sell. So a lot of people are put off by sales, but if you're going to work for yourself, sales is a huge part of that. And the way I look at sales is just educating people about the value of what you do. Just being able to be passionate about what you're doing and being able to articulate how it can help other people and why they should pay you.
I wanted you to say passionate because I think that makes a good salesperson too, and that's the best way to sell yourself. If you're passionate about what you're doing, you're really going to stand out. So
yeah, and that's so important today, being able to sell yourself and being able to convince people, that you're credible, especially when you're starting out. And it's probably even more important for homeschoolers just because, the reality is a lot of people that are doing the hiring, have master's degrees. And obviously their education, their degree is a huge part of their identity. So you really need to kind of overcome maybe their inherent biases against homeschoolers, right? Or people that are self-educated. And you can do that by really impressing people with, what you can point to what you've done, your kind of accreditation is. One thing I want to say that's a really good plan for kids if they're not sure what they want to do is instead of going to university, try interning at a startup. And if you work hard, they'll hire you. And in many cases, you don't even need to intern. You can just start working at a startup with no skills, just passion and maybe a little bit of technology interest and some skills you develop on your own there.
That's wonderful. What are some long-term goals that you see for yourself and for your business?
Basically, I want to hit 1 million students. That's my goal. 5 years, I want to have 1 million people have taken my courses. And I have a long way to go, but that's a huge influence. Another thing I'm really interested in is kind of the spiritual side of things. I work with a Vedic scholar in Vancouver, and basically, if people aren't familiar with the Vedas, it's basically the oldest books of knowledge in the world. It's thousands of years older than the Bible. Out of India, it's almost 10,000 years old, and it's all this library of knowledge that, out of that comes eventually Buddhism and meditation and yoga, and it's so profound in kind of giving people this holistic way of seeing the world. And I'm really passionate about helping people see the world in a holistic way and not be kind of caught up in their dogmas and their concepts of the way the world they think it is, but being able to experience it directly, being able to quiet their minds and really experience things directly. And I think that's a really important skill because we have this crazy crisis of consciousness in the world today where we have a civilization that's, basically, accelerating toward a brick wall, right? In terms of ecological collapse and in terms of people in America today, your average worker is just almost like a slave. They're just more and more squeezed out of them and less, humanity in the system unless the worker has really valuable skills, and it's a little different. So we need to kind of wake up and make a society that's a little more sustainable and compassionate.
Well, and I like what you were just saying about getting outside your dogma because I think technology is advancing so quickly that unless you can get yourself out of that, like how we've seen the traditional world work, it's not working that direction anymore. And until people can get themselves out of that, they are going to continue to kind of be in this slave mentality of we work for somebody else versus what the world is really turning to.
Yeah. If you can create jobs, as an entrepreneur, the world will help you because every kind of area of the world is trying to find ways to facilitate innovation, entrepreneurship, because every economy is desperate for jobs. If you're an entrepreneur and you can kind of create your own job and then hire other people, there's all sorts of tax breaks and funding that's available to get you started and to sustain you when you have hard times.
So do you have a favorite resource or book that you want to share?
Well, on my website, if you sign up for my email list, I have an online business action kit, basically 10 resources you can use to kind of start making things online and build an online business and build an online audience. In terms of resources, a book I'd highly recommend is a book called Lynchpin by a guy called Seth Godin. And he's basically, in my opinion, he's kind of like the oracle of the information age. And he talks a lot about how we're in a post-industrial economy and schools are still pumping people out for this industrial economy that doesn't exist anymore, at least doesn't exist in America or in Canada, these advanced economies, and that people need to think differently about building connections and really, building unique value for other people. And that book is I think, a manual for being self-directed and, really getting out there and being an entrepreneur.
It sounds like quite a paradigm changer.
We need to empower people, like, as a society in school and whatnot, we waste so much of the resources of people. So many people come out of school thinking they're dumb just because they don't learn in like this rote learning environment, which is basically just memorization, and it's silly. Like, we just don't value a lot of people's skills. And if we're going to continue to prosper, we need to make sure everybody is empowered to be a learner and to be creative so that, we can have all these new inventions and innovations that can solve all these problems we have. Like, I really look at school and I think of like how many Einsteins and Teslas and Da Vinci's have been suppressed and alienated by our school system. It's cost us as a society dearly.
Yeah, and we need to get back to valuing each person's abilities and skills and see them, as valuable people. So is there any changes you'd like to see in the future? We've kind of talked about a few, but...
Well, I really believe strongly in a holistic model for education and the world. I think, one of the worst things taught in our school system is this whole mentality of scientific materialism, that all there is the material world and that we're just this like random occurrence of chemicals and, and the universe is this place of randomness and there's no meaning in things. Kind of this atheistic science, I think, is really detrimental to people's well-being and their psyche and their mental health. And I think people need to learn how to fit things together better. Our school system is so compartmentalized, where you learn history over here and biology here and chemistry here and physics here and business here. But really what's important today and what really makes someone creative and innovative is like how they fit all these things together, how they recognize patterns across disciplines. And
the crazy thing is nobody's life outside of school, nobody's life is fit into, categories like that. I mean, even making dinner, you're using so many different skills all at the same time, something as simple as that.
Yeah, and I like that you brought up the food thing, because I think looking at the average person's health today, it's a disaster. Like, the American diet has been like hijacked by all these multinational corporations that just pump the food full of sugar and all this terrible stuff. And
yes, thank you, FDA.
Yeah, and a lot of these people, that are overweight today are actually biologically addicted, and it's beyond their control. And I think it's so important that we raise kids and we train kids in our schools how to be healthy, how to exercise every day, how to offset this sedentary lifestyle we live.
How to make your own food.
Yeah, it's and what to cook, and that McDonald's and Burger King is not real food. It's plastic food, and it's nutritionless. People shouldn't be eating that stuff. I can see a future where all those businesses don't exist anymore because people are smarter than to fill their bodies with garbage, right?
Yeah, and hopefully less busy, I guess. So is there any favorite quote that you want to end with, and then give us your contact information so that we can get in touch with you?
Yeah, let me think of my favorite quote. I think one of the quotes I really like is by this guy, William Gibson. He's a science fiction writer, and he says that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed yet. And you see in the world today that people that live in wealthy countries have access to all these computers and technology, and there's so many possibilities, but so much of the world today subsists on $1 or a few dollars a day, and they're kind of locked out of this kind of system of advancement and well-being, and we need to kind of spread it to everybody. And even within our societies, a lot of people are still back in the industrial age in the way they think and the bureaucracies they work in. And, other people are, creating new startups in Silicon Valley, and they're really using the latest technology to innovate and do things differently. So many different people exist today in these different kind of time spaces. And it's so important to really understand what the latest technology can do and the possibilities it creates and where it's going, because really things are changing really fast, and jobs are being automated and eliminated, and it's so important that people adopt, because young people today are going to be doing 10 or 15 different jobs in their life, and often in entirely different kind of industries. So,
and moving around too.
Yeah, and being comfortable with that change and complexity, because really the only competitive advantage someone has is their ability to learn faster than other people. And really learning how to learn is, I think, a really valuable thing. And learning how to manage yourself and be productive is really something that's crucial today.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
If you want to get a hold of Kyle Pearce, he's on Twitter. Also, you can reach him at his email, kyle@diygenius.com. We need more fire starters like Kyle. Please go to our website, luminousmind.net, and sign up to be a fire starter today. Also, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and on Google+, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as iTunes and Stitcher. Help us light the fire and change the paradigm of education.